Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 218, and today we are chatting with Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT. We're continuing our conversation from a couple weeks ago where we talked about helping ourselves stay regulated when we are neurodivergent parents raising and homeschooling neurodivergent kids. And this week we talked all about how to help our kids regulate and kind of co-regulate also when they have siblings that may have different sensory needs or similar sensory needs. How does everybody in the house regulate when everybody's triggering everybody else? It's a really good conversation, and I think you're going to like it. Special thanks before we get started to our sponsors for this episode, CTC Math and Reading Eggs. Check them out at ctcmath.com and readingeggs.com. We really appreciate their support. So give them a little bit of love. All right, this is a great conversation. So I would encourage you to take some time to yourself to really be able to dive in. Reach out if you have any questions afterwards, or I'd love to hear your biggest takeaway. So pop your earbuds in, go for a walk, tackle some chores, go hide in a quiet place, and really enjoy this episode. All right, let's get on with it. Okay. I am super excited to have my friend Sarah Collins back to talk more about sensory challenges and just to kind of go further on some of the conversations that we've had. But if you are just tuning in to the podcast, make sure you go check out some of the past episodes with Sarah. We'll link to them in the show notes. But for those who might just be stumbling upon the podcast for the first time, Sarah, would you just introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and what you're all about?
I will. I would love to. Yeah. So like you just said, I'm Sarah Collins. I am the owner and I guess sole OT, Homeschool OT. I work primarily with homeschool parents to kind of set up our homeschool days or adjust the environment or help to use occupation to help our children be successful in what they need and want to do. So yeah, this is number 3, 4, 5 of our podcast together, which is such an honor. And it's just, I really, really enjoy talking about all things sensory processing and executive functioning and handwriting. And so I'm psyched to be here.
And we have so much positive feedback from listeners when we have you on. And so Sarah and I have talked about kind of, making this a regular thing because there's so many benefits to occupational therapy for kids who are neurodivergent. And oftentimes homeschooling parents in particular don't necessarily have the resources or the ability to get services in their area. And so at the very least, having these conversations can give you starting points at home when you're homeschooling your kids, or can help you be able to see when you may need to seek out outside help. And so it's really great to be able to talk about these things, through both the perspective that I have, which is an educational standpoint in working with neurodivergent kids, and then your standpoint from the occupational therapy perspective. So it's very valuable and very rich.
Thank you. Yeah. And it covers so many different topics, like what we were saying, because occupation is really anything and everything that a person wants to do. So it starts, anything from getting up out of bed in the morning to all the way through, learning to read and brushing your teeth, all the way to eating, all the way, it's just everything that you need and want to do during the day is an occupation. So there are so many of those, little underlying issues or skill sets that we need to build. And for us to be able to talk about it and kind of explain the why, I think hopefully, like what you were saying, that's what parents can get from this. And that's the whole goal of Homeschool OT.
Absolutely. And like I said before, we'll link to the past episodes in the show notes, as well as all of the resources on Sarah's site and the coupon codes that she has available for listeners here and all of her different offerings. So make sure you check that out at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast. But last time, Sarah, you were on, we talked about kind of the co-regulation
Yes.
issues and challenges that go along when we are triggered as parents who struggle with sensory challenges from their kids, and what kinds of things we can do to regulate ourselves. In this episode, I really want to dive into the kids. I want to talk about some of the things that we might be seeing if a kiddo is struggling with regulation, and then what happens when you have more than one child and some of them may have opposite needs sensorily, and then you have some that maybe don't have any exceptionalities when it comes to their sensory needs or their occupational therapy type needs. And then how do we help them with their with their siblings who are, in need of those different things. So why don't you just start by telling us some of the things that we may be noticing at home with regards to kids who need those kinds of helps that you can offer, or might have some challenges that would need occupational therapy resources, and then some of the things that we can do to kind of troubleshoot some of that.
Okay. So we have a lot to unpack. So first, I kind of want to talk about what exactly are the senses, right? Because we know, or most people know about, your seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and touching. And then there's also vestibular, which is where you are in space in regards to your surroundings. So kind of where your head is positioned, or in your posture, if you're looking down, if you're looking up, helping you with your balance. So that is a very important sense that is often overlooked. And that one is also the most alerting sense. So if you think about kids spinning a lot, they're really seeking or craving that vestibular stimulation, and that happens a lot with our kiddos. After I started working later on in life with older population, like the geriatric population, we have falls, we realize, wait, it really is important to provide our children with lots of opportunities for vestibular stimulation, even when they're young, so that they keep doing it across the lifespan and we don't have as many falls as, kids. So no, here in your homeschool, if you're working on that, or you're encouraging that in your kids' movement, climbing, jumping, yoga, like anything where we're moving, you're impacting them for the rest of their lives. Another sense, this is my little soapbox on there.
I love it.
And we as parents need to be moving too. It's not just little guys. Another sense, proprioception. And so that is the sense of knowing where your body is, but not in relationship to space, but in relationship to itself. So something like my arm is up, my legs are down. It's how you know how much force to use. So if you ever go to, let's say you get an Amazon box, right, on the front, because who doesn't get a lot of Amazon boxes? All right. So it's at your front door, and you think it's your monthly order of paper towels, but in reality, I don't know, someone ordered like a bowling ball. So like you go to pick up the box, and you're expecting that paper towel, you're going to not have much force there, but you needed more, so it's how you know how much to use within your body. To do that, you have to understand what's happening. You have to know how much your arms need to flex. You need to know like how to bend over and use your back muscles, or your belly muscles, your leg muscles, so you're not going to break your back, all of these things. So that's the sense of proprioception. On the reverse side of vestibular, which is the most activating or alerting sense, proprioception is actually the most calming. It's what helps us to organize. Because think about, if you know what's going on with your body, you're calmer, you're more regulated, is another word we say, or organized. But that's where you might have heard the term heavy work. That is working on the sense of proprioception, or helping us to know where our body is. And then the last sense that is not as typical to hear about is interoception. And that is understanding what is happening internally with your body. So it is understanding, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I need to use the restroom, I'm tired, and also emotions. So being able to decipher between being excited and being anxious, or sad and angry. Like these are all things that happen internally that we need to be able, like with sensory processing, we're able to understand, to process those senses. So what do those senses have to do with being able to attend or focus or be, like what we were saying, regulated? And what is sensory processing disorder? Okay. that's our second thing we're going to unpack here. So when you're taking in all of this information from, again, from your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your nose, knowing your vestibular sense and knowing where your body is, when you're taking in all of that, you have to be able to what we say regulate or organize it. So what that means is that your brain is interpreting it enough that you can be alert and not overwhelmed or underwhelmed. So there is a way to kind of break it down and think like overwhelming, underwhelming, or seeking, right? So if overwhelmed, so imagine, I mean, this can happen to anybody. We've talked about it last time with parents. Like this isn't I can process all of everything that I'm taking in all of the time, 100% of the time, or none, I have a disorder. It's more like on a regular basis, can you take in all of this information so that you are able to participate in what you need and want to do? But sometimes when you're taking in more and more, like for example, it's a new environment. Like let's say we go to the fair, right? So you have different smells, lots of animals there, pretty smelly, lots of different sounds. The lights are bright. You're probably eating food that you didn't, and you don't have like water available all the time. So you might be thirsty. You don't want to use the porta potty. So maybe you got stuff going on internally there. It's a lot more to process all of that information in a new environment. So we might end up with kids who are overwhelmed, or adults who are overwhelmed, who they've taken in so much, and then you've got meltdown city. Okay, so that is like our overwhelming. Underwhelming, if you think about like maybe after Thanksgiving dinner and you've got, had turkey and everyone just feels like, bleh, you're groggy, or when you first wake up in the morning, you haven't, had your coffee, you're just not ready. Or your kids, like they have a certain time of their day when they're able to be more alert, but maybe it's been rainy outside and nobody's been moving much. They've been sitting really still, so they haven't had that vestibular input. So they're underwhelmed. They're not able to get their bodies alert enough to focus on what they need and want to do. So those two. Then we also have kids who are craving constantly, they're the ones who are spinning and who want really crunchy foods and really intense tastes. And when they're not spinning, they're crashing into things. They are really active. They're movers, they're shakers. They are later on in life, they're skydivers, right? This doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means they need more stimulation to get into that zone, or that, the spot where you can participate really well in what you need and want.
Yeah, it reminds me of my daughter, who was identified with sensory processing disorder. And when we first started seeing an occupational therapist years and years ago, I mean, she graduated from OT and, is now 14, but she checked so many boxes, right? When we went there, the OT was pretty confident that she was going to be able to help Logan, because she seemed on the surface like a classic seeker, right? And so she'd work with her and she'd do really well, and she'd be able to talk with her, afterwards, and it would seem like it was working, and we'd work on these activities and things at home. And I kept coming in and saying, she's still not, it's not giving her enough input, because she's still craving more and more and more. And I said to the OT, could it be something like when I'm dealing with gifted kids and we have a twice exceptionality where they've got a struggle like sensory processing disorder or anxiety or dyslexia or something else, and they are cognitively gifted, you really do have to tap into both aspects of the brain's wiring in order to meet that. Have you ever had a kiddo who's cognitively and imaginatively gifted while being a sensory seeker? And she's like, I've never even heard of twice exceptionalities. And so she did a little bit of research, and I did some more research. And the next time she came in, she had Logan doing activities that were for the input she needed, but then was challenging her to do things in like rainbow and then reverse rainbow order to kind of engage the cognition as well. And oh my gosh, it really made a difference. And I remember sitting down with her OT afterwards, and she was just so thankful to be exposed to something different, because it had never occurred to her that those things would go hand in hand. But it's so interesting that when you find what works, it really does work. You don't always think that climbing a rock wall or spinning on a swing is going to actually calm your kids down. But when their body is needing those things, it does.
Yeah. And I would even say a lot of the times when our kids are needing to focus, to take in more cognitive information, oftentimes they need that movement to help to organize. Because you remember that either, depending on where they are, that vestibular can be helping them to stay alert so that they're focused on, cognitively what we're trying to have them do. Or the opposite, like if they are taking in so much information and they need to help to calm their bodies, they might need a lot of that proprioception. I can give an example. My son, who also now he's diagnosed by me, by his mom, it's a little different. I've never had to, our only formal assessments were, in the school, and that was for reading other issue. I digress here. It doesn't matter.
I understand because I have one of my 4 who's formally diagnosed with giftedness, and everybody else I look at and I'm like, okay, I know where you approximately fall, but we haven't gone through formal identification in that specific area.
Yes, because I'm looking at like, okay, what my goal is to help you to succeed and what you need and want. Yes, there are times that I need some assistance, and for sure when that happened, and it did, that's what we sought out. But most of the time I'm like, I got the sensory piece. I understand this. I can help you with that. But so his vision was, he had convergence disorder. He had visual saccades that he could not like visually track. So visual scanning disorder, all of this difficult stuff for him to be able to take in information through his eyes. So his world wasn't quite making sense. So because of that, he was always seeking movement. He was trying to figure out where he was in space. Also, at the same time, would be touching everything all the time. He's feeling, he's reaching all around, but those are very alerting. So then he would need a lot of that proprioception to help to calm him down. So now he's different now, he's almost 13 and, neurological systems have matured. His vision is different. We went through vision therapy. So it's a different situation now. But when he was younger and we were learning to read, everything would have to be things that he could touch, he could feel, and he could move around. So we had to incorporate all of that together. So we would have, we'd be doing spelling. We used All About Spelling, and I would put the letters out, not just their tiles, but I used Montessori letters that I would put out on the floor. And he would ride on a scooter. He'd pull himself, which is your proprioception, pull himself down on his belly, find a letter, literally spin that thing around in circles and come back down to the other end and, put his C down there or whatever, and then go back and do the same thing across the house over and over. So we had to incorporate all of these sensory pieces because that's what his sensory system needed. It was a mix of, he needed that vestibular to stay alert, but then right after that, he needed that proprioception to help it to integrate or to organize. So it's like a mix, and needed to do it with, all of our academic tasks so that he was focused and had the desire to do so. He wanted to be challenged all at the same time. Exactly what you're saying.
So how do we as homeschool parents fit that in or figure it out or find ways to help our kids be able to do the things that they need or they want to do? Because listeners run the gamut here from one style of homeschooling to another. How do we help them and know what they need and help them know what they need for themselves?
So I think there's 4 main things that I kind of want to go through here. The first one is that you as the parent are the most important asset. Like your observation skills are the most important. So think about, what are they doing, when it is a task that they need and want to do? Are you seeing wiggling? Are you seeing moving? Are you seeing like slouched in a chair? Are you seeing them press every single muscle of their body against, the legs or the back of a chair? As soon as they're done, are they like crashing into the walls or moving? These are pieces of information that can help you say, wait, is he wiggling and moving like that because he's seeking, or do we see someone crashing into something because, again, that's proprioception and he's trying to calm his body? Is he hiding under things? Like, what and when are you seeing these seeking behaviors or this sensory need? When are you seeing that happen? Is it in only one environment? Is it more? So that's kind of the observation skills that you would need. And again, like when I work with parents, those are the things we talk through the most, to help hone in on those observation skills. But so that's your first thing, is to observe. Your second is to begin to communicate with your children about it. So there are two main programs that I usually talk about in regards to communicating about sensory needs with children. So one is the zones of regulation, and the other is the alert program. Both are written by occupational therapists, and they really help to say, like, how do I feel right now within sensory needs? So meaning, we talked about that, like underwhelming. So that in the zones of regulation, they call that the blue zone. Or am I really alert? I'm in that great, zone where I'm focused, right? So that's your green zone. Or am I starting to become overwhelmed? I'm feeling really, kind of agitated. I'm taking in too much. That's yellow. Or overwhelmed, done, I cannot focus, I cannot take in any more information, I cannot process all of this, that's your red zone. So starting to communicate about those is number two. Like after you're observing, build that communication system into your house, however you want to do it. So that's the zones program. The alert program is a little bit more concrete, and that one you would be relating to, you can do engines, or you can do, it's called How Does Your Engine Run? Or I've had people who do like Disney princesses, someone did, or animals. But basically you're saying, like, when I am able to focus or in that zone, like I'm calm like a cat, or I feel like a sloth when you're under, or on the other side, I feel like a cheetah, my body just is feeling blah, I'm running. So however you can work that with your children so that you are talking about it, that's your number two. Your third thing would be to add in more physical movement during the day. So it very, very rarely is a kid going to be able to sit and focus for a long time, right? So we want to make sure that we're giving them movement throughout the day so that they can learn more about their bodies. Now, again, proprioception is the most calming and organizing sense. So the more we're offering that to our children, the better. Interestingly, proprioception and interoception are very closely related. That's what some of the newest research is showing, even genetically. But so if you think about that, like if you're laying on your couch and then all of a sudden you get up and you're like, oh, wait, I'm really thirsty and hungry. When's the last time I've eaten, right? Because you weren't moving. You were not nearly as in tune to your body. It's the same thing with our kids. We're asking them to sit still and ignore their body signals, when in reality, if we get up and we get moving, we can feel more, we can be more in tune to what's happening. So add that movement into your day, whether you are, you're doing jumping jacks, you're doing Cosmic Kids yoga, you're going outside and climbing trees, whatever fits in, it doesn't matter. You're doing chores. Like, that's a big piece of our homeschool, is after we do our morning time where we're sitting, is we're all working together to clean. I've got one who's sweeping, I've got one, washing a window, whatever, because that gives that movement that can help them to clue into what's going on in their body. So what did I say? I said observe, communicate, and move. And yeah, those are my main ones. Add those in through the day.
Hey there. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit more about CTC Math. We've been using it for a few years now, and I had a conversation with my daughter the other day. She came to me and she said, Mom, I was going to the next lesson in my math program, and she said, I looked at it and it's something that I already know how to do. Do you want me to go through and just keep doing it? That seems kind of boring. And so we glanced through the different lessons that were in the unit, and she did. She could tell me exactly what she knew and proved that she knew all of the stuff that was coming up over the next 10 lessons. So I said, okay, skip it. You don't need to do something that you already know how to do, and you just proved to me that you know how to do it. That's just one of the reasons I love CTC Math. I've said before that they are sponsors of this podcast, and I'm so grateful to their sponsorship, but I'm also a customer. I pay for my subscription every year, and I have for the last several years. We are strong supporters of CTC Math. We love them. We appreciate them for so many reasons, and that is just one. And I'm not the only one. I've gotten a couple emails recently. This one's from Jamie. Jamie said, at your recommendation, we switched over to CTC Math last month. We have used another curriculum for several years, but it just wasn't meeting our needs anymore. Now we've settled into a good rhythm. The kids are loving it, and I love that we are able to adapt it for each of their individual needs. Thank you so much for the recommendation. Jamie, I love that, and I was so excited to hear it because it just goes to show I'm not the only one who has had that experience from CTC, being able to adjust on the fly as our kids are learning. I love, love, love that. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, go to ctcmath.com. You will not be sorry. Okay, are you looking for a reading program for your kiddos that they are going to love? Imagine a curriculum that doesn't just teach your homeschooled kids to read, but turns learning into fun. That's Reading Eggs. Seriously, it's designed for kids 2 to 13. It covers phonics, sight words, comprehension, spelling, and more, all backed by solid scientific research. It's trusted by over 20 million users worldwide. It's the go-to choice for homeschoolers everywhere. We have used it off and on throughout the years, depending on which kid needed what. And here's the best part. The program works at your child's level. It builds their confidence and helps them stay motivated. It's KidSafe certified, completely ad-free. And when you sign up, you get a free 30-day trial and get instant access to hundreds of lessons, worksheets, ebooks, and detailed reports with access for up to 4 kids. Seriously, 4 kids right off the bat and access to the whole program. You can try it full on out for 30 days without any commitment. You don't have anything to lose. You can make learning to read easy, fun, and nurture a lifelong love of reading along the way. Check it out at readingeggs.com/RLL. That's readingeggs.com/RLL. I love that. It was making me laugh as you were talking about like the different kinds of things as you observe. I talk a lot on here and in person about being a student of your child. And I think that, as homeschool parents, we have that opportunity to do so. And I even encourage parents to take a notepad, put a little sticky notepad in your pocket, or there's all sorts of little mini notepads on the market. Just stick one in your pocket and jot things down when you notice. But sometimes it takes outside people to notice, right? Yeah. I have a friend who, if you're listening and you've ever noticed any pictures on my website over the last 2 years or my social media, most of those pictures are taken, and you can see I'm in a lot of them. Most of those are taken by a friend of mine, Heather Tully, who is a lifestyle and documentary photographer. She lives in Atlanta, but she's got friends. She lived in Ohio for a long time, and I met her through another friend online, and then we became friends. And so once a year, she travels to Ohio to visit family and so longtime family friends. And her main job is this documentary photography, where she goes to families' homes and she stays with them the night before she shoots. Yeah. And then she shoots for 12 straight hours. So she documentary photography is literally documenting your life. So you have pictures of what your everyday life looks like. So she offered to do this. I pay her. She comes and I pay her. The upside to her traveling to Ohio from Atlanta anyway is I don't have to pay her travel fees, because we always tack on an extra day or two. But this is now my 3rd year in a row having her come and stay with us. And it's been fascinating, right? So I have all these wonderful pictures that I use on my website. I use on my social media. I will have when my kids leave about what our everyday life as homeschoolers and a family look like. But we were sitting there, and she went and grabbed her camera, because we were kind of taking a break. The two of us, we were having a glass of wine together in the evening, one of the nights that she was here this last time. And she's like, oh, hang on a second. She ran and got her camera, and she was snapping pictures from behind of Isaac, my 10, almost 11-year-old. And she's like, I'm so excited. He still does it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. She's like, have you never noticed that when he is concentrating really hard, he stands like a flamingo? He pops one of his legs up and forks it onto the other leg, and he looks like a number 4. And sure enough, I looked back through the 3 years of photos,
Yeah.
and
And you see it.
when he's working or he's concentrating or he's eating something or he's
Yeah.
telling you something that's important to him, he is standing like a flamingo. And none
And
of us had
so now
noticed it.
let's look at this OT side. So he's pressing into his leg probably
Uh-huh.
with his other foot. That's all that proprioception that he's getting right there to help him to organize everything that's going on so he can focus.
It's so interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So
And
cool.
like he didn't even know he did it.
Yeah.
When Heather told him, he was like, I stand like a flamingo. What are you talking about? But I even noticed it this morning. He opened the refrigerator because he was trying to find a snack to
Mhm.
offset the cereal he had, because that's like such empty calories and sugar, and it was already burning off. And so I'm like, you need to get some protein. So he opened the refrigerator and he immediately got in the flamingo stance as
I
he's like
love it. Yep.
concentrating and focusing on what's in the refrigerator that he could pull together into a meal. And I thought that was so fascinating.
Yep.
Then I have another one who is, well, he is as well. He's very physical and needs lots and lots of physical input. But my Logan does as well. And so recently, very recently, I bought a box of rock wall holds because we have a woodshed in the backyard
Good
that
for
just
you.
sits there and it's sheer. I mean, it's a building. And I was like, wouldn't it be fun to just stick a, and the kids have been asking for a rock wall.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm
Yeah.
racking my brain. How could we make this happen? So it's at a slant and it's safe. And I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
My youngest kid is almost 11.
Yeah.
We can
He's fine.
totally
He's gonna
go for
climb up the wall.
danger.
Yep.
So we did. We put these, whatever, 30 some rock holds. And Isaac then wanted a bell. So we have like a dinner bell, an old fashioned dinner bell
Yeah.
off of
I
the
mean, you gotta
woodshed.
have the achievement of being
Right.
done. Sure.
So that's like, it's super cool. It's a
Yep.
favorite place. And once or twice a day, they both go out there and they like climb as fast as they can to ring the bell. But both of those things, the knowledge of the flamingo pose and the need for and the idea of the rock wall, it comes from observation. And then
Yep.
the desire to make sure that we're moving. But then also, like you said, communicating. I think it's super important for us to communicate and for us to help our kids communicate
Yes.
what their needs are. So they know that, yeah, it's kind of fun and silly that you do this flamingo pose, but here's what's happening. And I'm actually,
Yeah.
after I get off today, I'm going to go tell him what
Go tell
Miss
him
Sarah
why.
says that means, because that's really, really cool and really
Yeah.
interesting.
And so most of those things we call like sensory quirks, meaning, he really he craves that in his leg, but it's not something that's either going to make or break his ability to succeed in what he needs and wants to do, right? And nobody's telling him you can't stand like a flamingo. I personally, when I wake up in the morning, I put on a sweatshirt every morning with a hood because I'm not ready for all of the other sounds that I'm supposed to be hearing. It gives out a little more weight. Like that's a sensory quirk. It's not sensory processing disorder, but it is more that this is something that I do to help my body. And you're right. If you're talking about it, the more and more like, oh, I've noticed that you stand like a flamingo. I've noticed that every morning you get up and before you, I don't know, come downstairs, you slide on the floor. This is literally what my son used to do. You would slide across the floor. Do you notice that you do that? Just kind of asking those types of questions, or how does your body feel before? How does your body feel after? So that they can start to process it and realize, yeah, this is something that I need. That awareness can later on bring on your advocacy. Like, you know what? I am great in the morning for a meeting, but yeah, first I need to whatever. I mean, I don't think he's going to be sliding on the floor when he's, 40 years old, but first I have to do this, and this, whatever it is.
You never know, though.
I know, maybe he will be. And
I was
maybe he's
telling
the advocate
Sarah
to his
before we got on here, true confessions. I scheduled a podcast interview earlier this morning, and I'm not a morning person. I've talked about this on the podcast before. I'm just definitely not a morning person. And I kept pressing snooze and kept pressing snooze. And then when I finally dragged myself out of bed, I really had two choices. I could go shower and like actually get ready, or I could make coffee. And so I chose to make coffee and just get ready from the top up, because that was all that was going to show to my guest. And so I did, and it was fine, but I needed that. It's actually less about the caffeine, though. I do know about me and my own brain that it's a focusing thing for me. It's not, a waking up thing. It's a focusing, more of the ADHD and the stimulant effect, but it's ritualistic too. It's the heat It's
Mhm. Yeah,
the
what you're touching, the
sips, yep,
smell.
the
Yep.
smell, the holding of the cup and
Mhm,
the act
mhm.
of, you know, doing that is what I need to wake up. I actually tell people when I speak that my kids know that before they can really ask me anything, if they want a yes or want me to actually consider it, that I need coffee in my bloodstream and I need water on my head. I need my
Ah,
shower
there
to
you
like
go.
alert me, and I need my hit of caffeine to get the cobwebs out of my brain.
Yep, yep. To say yes. I love it. I'm picturing them like bringing it to you. And that's, I mean, my kids know like once I lower my hood, it's a whole different story. But when I'm, kind of blocking out that sound, that's not really the time to come talk to me. And so they're already honing in on their observation skills. So we just have to do the same thing. Yeah. Be a student of your student.
Well, and how wonderful is that, right? When we think about it, it's something that I've talked about actually a lot recently, is that the idea that we are the example for our kids about what healthy
Yes.
adulthood looks like and what a
Mhm,
healthy parent looks like. And so by acknowledging and respecting our own needs, we're showing
mhm.
them, we talked about this last time you and I were on together, we're showing them how to be healthy and how to advocate for themselves. But we're also showing them, we're normalizing that idea, right? That
Yeah,
everybody needs
totally.
different things and it's okay. It's not bad, it's not wrong, it's not broken, it's not, better
Nope.
or worse. It just
Menu.
is. And so making sure that they're aware of their needs and the needs of others around them so they can respect them in turn is super, super important, and something it's a gift we can give them early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings us to, we wanted to talk a little bit about like siblings.
Yep.
So, what do we do if we've got one kiddo who is seeking frequently or craving that sensory information, and one who becomes very overwhelmed by it and might be overwhelmed by their own sibling? This has happened in my house very frequently. I will even say back to 2 days ago. I mean, my daughter, who is 15, when we do our morning time, we're all together and I'm often, reading aloud and they're doing kind of their own things as long as they're not talking. I don't care what they're doing. And so she does paint by number all the time. And my older son, who's again almost 13, he is often pretty calm and like playing Legos or something. But that day, for whatever reason, he was chasing the dog back and forth and they're going. And she just turned around and she was like, like it just got her, that movement and the sound and like what she was seeing and hearing, it was too much for her in that moment because it was not predictable. So they did not communicate, and that caused her to blow up. So we often I have to say to both of them, and I have another child too, but I have to say to all of them then, your sensory needs are not more important than his, or his are not more important than yours, but we have to work together. Like we say, we're a team. Like we have to work together to make this happen. So, you need to be moving in that way. What else could you do? Or Annabelle, you need it quiet. What else could you do? And she, could put on her headphones or whatever. Or maybe she needs more deep pressure. Like we have to have that communication piece so that they can focus together, like so that they can be around each other. And that has taken a long time. I mean, that is not a super easy thing to do, but thinking that they're all maturing in both their communication skills and also their neurological systems and their thresholds of what they can handle are both different. A big thing for the two of them to help, I put them both actually in karate together when they were, let's see, Caleb was 6 and Annabelle was 8. And karate is fantastic because it is teaching you movement. It's giving you an order of movement, motor planning. It's giving you a lot of proprioceptive input that helps to calm the body, but you're also not competing in like if you're playing another sport and you're competing against each other, there's a winner or a loser and you're going to yell at each other. Plus, you're usually working at the same pace in those types of sports. Like you don't want to be the worst one on the team, right? That everyone's kind of relying on each other. But in karate or any type of martial arts, you're working at your own pace, but often in the same area. So they were like, she got her, next belt up before he did. It didn't matter. That wasn't a big thing, but they were still doing the same types of activities and it was still at the same time. So they had something in common that was physical, but not competitive against each other. That really helped them to manage that relationship and to grow it.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said too for that that shared language and those shared experiences, because it gives them common ground to talk through things. And then when they're speaking and interacting positively, then that can carry over into those
Yes.
times when,
Mhm.
things get frustrating. Okay, so what do we do in the moment? There are so many parents in this audience, so many listeners here who talk to me about that. I have a kid who cannot handle her
Mhm.
siblings chewing or
Mhm.
sniffling, or we have a whistler right now that
Yeah.
drives probably 4 out of the 6 of us crazy,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
one of them's just indifferent to the whistling. But how do you how do you deal with that? Because on the one hand, like you said, your sensory needs are not more important than my sensory needs, but you do have sensory needs. So
Mhm.
how do we manage this if somebody needs movement or sound or whatever to get their
Mhm.
schoolwork done or to think, while somebody else needs absolute quiet? How do we
Yeah.
reconcile that?
Yeah. So yeah, there's a mix of I always want to look at the person and the environment and the activity that we're trying to get done. So if it is something within the person, I try to think about what could we do before we're going to sit down together? Do you need to go move? Do you need to go outside? Do you like what can we do that could preempt you having those sensory needs in that moment? Now, frequently, kids are going to need oftentimes more sensory during when you are trying to focus for a while, right? So, for example, within our morning time, if my son does not get his movement before and needs to during it, he still is going to want, like, he drinks from a straw, or we just have to do it in a different way, if that's making sense. I'll give him a wiggle chair. I can give him TheraBand that he can pull on. So even though he has had it before, he's often going to need it intermittently during. But I have to pay attention to, these are the things that you can use right now, or the tools that you can have right now, because your sister's here too. And it's also important that she is not interrupted, right? So that's kind of the things within the person. Within the environment, you can look at the tools that you're using, like partially what I was mentioning. But then also, guys, sometimes it is that we can't all sit together, and that's okay. Like, let's look at the different time of day. Let's look at a different room. Let's look at, can we be outside or inside? If you're changing that environment, especially in a moment like literally yesterday when she was having such a hard time with it, we went outside and sat on our deck, right? So sometimes you need to switch that environment to make it so it's not going to be as loud or as vibrant or have so much movement right in that moment. And then the activity itself. So, okay, if a lot of times it's at dinner, that I've heard that people really struggle, like the sounds of people chewing or the smells of food, that can be really off-putting for some kids. And especially if you've got one who's like craving crunchy food, and then it's like crumbs are flying off their faces and it's messy all over. And and then the other one who really likes things neat and organized, and that's too much. Right. So let's think about, what can we eat? Like, what else could we change within that activity to help to be not abrasive to the others, right? So can we change something about that? Using the tools also. So that same thing with the environment. If we're talking about dinner tables, I can't tell you how many families that I talk to that I'm like, put TheraBand around the bottom of your chair so they can kick it back and forth and keep themselves, they're moving, but it's not interrupting everybody else. Or even changing the type of utensils that they're using so that, if something's like rubbery, so they can play with it on the end, that's not loud. Or a straw that you're going to drink out of that you can chew on, that's quiet, or when you're sucking, because that jaw proprioception, sucking and chewing, can really help. Like chewing something rough can really help to calm and organize the body. So again, after we've done the communication, then I'm thinking about, in this moment, like, what can I do? So we've got somebody who's like erupting, right? Or somebody who's way overwhelmed, and then somebody else who's mad because their brother or their sister or whatever is way overwhelmed. That's when it comes down to us being able to co-regulate. So if you can't change the environment, I change physically what my body is looking like. Sit down on the floor, get to somebody's eye level and be like, this is not what we can do right now. Maybe you're punching, you're not, the more verbal that you're getting in that moment, the harder it is. So maybe you sit down and model that you're going to hit a beanbag or you're going to hit a pillow because of all that proprioception that you're going to get. Once we're starting to calm everybody else, then you can have that conversation, but not in the moment.
Yeah, I think that's so important to remember, that idea of not doing it in the moment. You're not going to, when kids or adults are already amped up, right? You're not going to be able to change any behavior in that
Nope.
moment because everybody's like senses are already like overwhelmed and kind of crazed. I also really appreciated what you said about the idea that sometimes we really just can't have homeschool around the kitchen
Yeah.
table where we're all there together. If you've got
Yeah.
neurodivergent kids, there are kids who will need the quiet while others need the person around them. I've got one who comes and whistles and chews and stomps and moves his way through math,
Mhm. Mhm.
whereas another one needs everybody in the room to be quiet when math is going on. And so
Yeah.
we try to do something in a different room when she's working. And so sometimes when we can change the environment or the expectations surrounding whatever it is we need them to get done, we need to do that
Yeah.
and figure out ways to help them. This is why we homeschool, right? These kids would
Yes.
be crazy in a classroom because they
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to focus on anything. So we're giving them the opportunity to focus in the way their bodies and their brains need to focus, so that when it is something we can work on or something we can fix or tweak, like different utensils or whatever,
Mhm. Mhm.
then we can do that for them. So we help them grow to a different place, like where your son is now and where my daughter
Yeah.
is now.
Yeah. And, I love that you said this is one of the reasons why we homeschool, because for sure, but this is also one of the reasons and that we are able to teach them to self-advocate later on. Like if we are teaching them right now in the moment, well, sorry, buddy, it's very important to me that we all sit together at the kitchen table. We're still asking them to suppress whatever it is that their need is. And so whether that's in a classroom setting or whether that's at home, you're still asking them to do it. So in opposite, if we're saying, okay, so what is it that you need, or this isn't working for the two of us, let's see what else we can do to try to come up with something that's able to advocate differently, right? So you're able to later on come back to that and say, oh, this is what worked for me, or I am great in this meeting as long as I can bring my own really big pen, or whatever. I'm coming up with random advocating things, but we want to process this and communicate about it now and realize our homeschools, there's not one right way to do it, and nor we have to do it alone. Like we can really work with other people, we can talk about this. It's important to be doing that.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. So before we leave here, because we're to the end of our time already,
Yeah, we
this
are.
is one that we could talk about for a long, long time. What is the one kind of big takeaway that you would want to leave with parents who are struggling with kids who have these sensory needs, and then maybe siblings who have opposite needs or no needs at all and are annoyed by their siblings? Like, what is the one kind of biggest thing you could give to a parent when they're living through this idea of homeschooling sensory kids?
Move. Get up and move. Move all day because you can. You can move around your house into different spaces. You can go outside. No one says that, school has to be done in an environment where you're sitting at a desk. Like, get up and make that work. Make it so I'm looking outside and I'm seeing a tree, and now I'm going to climb it, and while I'm climbing it, we're going to talk about what the bark feels like and what I see here, and who else in history has ever climbed trees, and wow, these leaves are changing, right? Think of all of those different things that you have just addressed by while you're out there climbing a tree. So take your movement and your activity and then look at your academic portions of what you're doing while you're moving, rather than being like, okay, well, I have to get all of this stuff done, and once you do that, then you can then get in and do what it is that you think your body needs.
I love that. That's perfect. Though I do have to laugh because when you first said move, and you can tell where like my life has been, because it's been kind of crazy making for this season, I was like, okay, I will move. I will leave. I will go find my own apartment where it's quiet and
Yes.
nobody will talk to
See
me for
ya.
days. And
Packing my
not the same,
boxes
not
today.
not the same kind of moving.
Nope, nope, nope.
But yeah, we can definitely add in more. Everybody can, even if
Yeah.
you're moving a lot, you can
For
always add in
yourself too.
more
For
moving.
yourself.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for being here. And this is always a great conversation. And we've got another one coming up that we're going to record that'll come out closer to the holidays. So I'm excited about that one. But for those of you listening, there are so many resources about this topic, both on my site and for sure on Sarah's site. So
Mhm.
the show notes for this episode over at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast is going to have links to a bunch of different things, plus a summary slash kind of expansion of this topic. There will be an article, a post written too about this. So make sure you go over and check that out. Make sure you share this. If you got friends who you know have movers or seekers and may need some encouragement and some suggestions and ideas, share it out because they need to hear it and know that they're not alone. But yeah, I appreciate you all. I appreciate you so much, Sarah.
Thank you. I love being here. It's one of my favorite spots to come and chat.
I love it. I'm so appreciative. You are one of my favorite people. And for the rest of you, have a great week. We'll be back same time, same place next week. Enjoy your kids this week. Enjoy them. Have fun. Move and embrace lots and lots of adventures. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.